There are somewhere, depending on what day of the week it is, somewhere between 45, 47 formally designated foreign terrorist organizations, formally designated by our government. Of those 47, more than half now are involved in one or more aspects of the global drug trade to help keep their movements alive. Why is that happening? And by the way, that's an ultra-conservative number. It's far greater than just beyond half. It's somewhere probably much closer to 70 to 80% of those groups. So why are they doing this? Quite frankly, they're doing it, becoming involved in drug trafficking or some aspect of the global drug trade, some other transnational organized crime, because we've been extraordinarily successful at prosecuting the global war on terrorism. State sponsorship for terrorism still remains on the decline post 9/11, which causes these groups to look to search out other ways or other means by which to fund their operations. We have done yeoman's work. When I say that, our government, working with coalition partners, we have done yeoman's work at identifying and significantly disrupting very powerful private donors and those funding streams from around the globe. The second reason, biggest reason why more and more of these groups are turning to drug trafficking and transnational organized crime. Don't use my numbers. If you look at the United Nations, UNODC's numbers with respect to the 4 most significant illicit global markets that terrorist organizations are involving themselves in, let's look at their numbers. Global drug trade generates about $322, $325 billion a year in profit for, well, the trade in general. Alien trafficking comes in at second at about $32 billion, arms trafficking at about $10 billion, and the black diamond trade, massa manus, $1 billion. Okay? Those are the 4 biggest illicit markets that these groups are turning to. Is it any wonder why more and more of them are turning to drug trafficking? It's important to understand also that the cost of a terrorist attack is minimal. What costs a great deal of money, folks, is the care and nurturing of your terrorist organization. You've got to recruit. It's not cheap because you want to make sure you're recruiting the right people. You've got to indoctrinate once you believe you've successfully recruited. That costs a lot of money. You're working in a clandestine environment, okay? Safe houses, those counterfeit passports and other documents cost a lot of money. You have to arm your organization. That all costs tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year to operate your organization. So let's now drop from the 30,000-foot level and come down to treetop. Let's talk about Hezbollah for a minute, and I'll use them as the quintessential example, I believe, of a Middle Eastern terrorist organization that has made a monumental transition, just like the FARC did 18 years ago. Let me go back for just a minute and talk about this. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and this bolsters a couple of points that I've made. When the Soviet Union came apart at the seams 18, 19 years ago, the illicit funding stream into Cuba, downward into organizations like the FARC, Sendero, and others, dried up almost overnight. It took the executive secretariat of the FARC about 5 minutes to convene a meeting and make the corporate decision that they were going to have to involve themselves in the global drug trade, in the cocaine trade, if they were going to keep their movement alive. In 18 short years, folks, they went from an organization that's been around now for 47 years. They went from an organization that was driven purely by ideology to one that is driven absolutely by greed. In 18 short years, they have evolved into the world's single largest manufacturer and distributor of cocaine in the world. But wait a minute, they're a designated terrorist organization. Let's look at the Hezbollah. They're headed down the exact same path. They are entrenched all over Latin America now. They are exploiting ungoverned space in the tri-border area of Latin America. They are leveraging it to their advantage. They're also exploiting West Africa in a large way, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. They're moving tons of cocaine, typically out of the Andean region into Venezuela. Thank you, Hugo. From there into West Africa and then on to emerging markets for cocaine all over Europe, into Russia, and some other locations. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars a year behind this activity. If you look at the recent Department of Treasury FinCEN sanctions against the Lebanese bank, or the Lebanese Canadian bank, just what, about a month ago, I think February the 10th, cited the strong ties of the bank to a Lebanese cocaine trafficking organization that was moving over $200 million a month through that bank. And there are unequivocal ties to corporate Hezbollah in this DEA-led investigation that led to those Department of Treasury sanctions. There's evidence, folks, not just intelligence. There's evidence that will pass the judicial test, because if it wasn't there, those sanctions would have never been invoked on February the 10th of last month. The Hezbollah are absolute masters at identifying existing smuggling infrastructures around the globe. I don't care if it's in the Sahel area of northern Africa. I don't care if it's in the tri-border area of Latin America or if it is on our southwest border. They're masters at identifying these existing infrastructures, smuggling infrastructures, and leveraging them so that they can move virtually anything that they want, whether they be drugs or weapons of mass destruction, operatives or whatever. They are on our southwest border. In 2003, a high-level Hezbollah operative used an existing drug and alien smuggling system, or if you will, or organization in Tijuana to move into the United States, obviously illegally, and he made his way all the way into the city of Detroit before the FBI was able to get their hands on him. Okay? As recently as just about 4 or 5 months ago, the Mexican federal police busted up a Hezbollah recruiting cell on our southwest border. What are they doing there? Stop and think about it. Mexican drug trafficking organizations absolutely dominate the drug trade in our country today. The National Drug Intelligence Center, led by the Department of Justice, tells us that over 230 cities are now plagued and basically dominated by Mexican drug trafficking organizations. Does anyone in this room think for 1 minute that Hezbollah doesn't recognize that for everything that it's worth and is not working hard to leverage what that process and system and cartels can do for them? They absolutely are. Now let me sum this up by, not sum this up, let me close by talking about one other thing with this growing drugs and terror nexus that causes me to lose sleep to this day. I talked about the growing demand for cocaine in Europe. Massive amounts of cocaine are now flowing from the Andean region into West Africa, into Europe through the soft underbelly of Spain. We have known for a long, long time that in places like Guinea-Bissau in West Africa, the quintessential example of ungoverned space, we've known that Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, AQIM have been there and working that area for a long time. It's of strategic importance to them. But now we have the most sophisticated organized crime groups the world has ever known, Colombian and Mexican drug trafficking cartels that are occupying the same exact space at the same exact time as those Middle Eastern terrorist organizations. Why? Because they were sent there to set up the transshipment infrastructure that was necessary to move those tons of cocaine into Europe via West Africa. I've been to Guinea-Bissau, okay? It is a nasty place. There's not a lot to do there. And I'll tell you what's happening as we speak right now. Terrorist operatives and operatives from Colombian and Mexican drug trafficking cartels are staying in the same shady hotels. They're sharing the same prostitutes in the same sweaty brothels, and they're drinking at the same nasty bars because there's no place else to go. What are they doing? I'm not an academic, folks. This is coming from somebody that fought this for 35 years as a practitioner in nasty places all around the world. I'll tell you what they're doing. They're talking business. They're sharing lessons learned. That's what they're doing. That's what organized crime does. I, as a terrorist, turn to a Colombian trafficker and say, we're having a great deal of difficulty moving our tens of millions of dollars in cash out of Latin America. Can you help me? Oh, yeah, we can absolutely help you. We're having some trouble getting our hands on AK-47s and ammunition. Can you help us? Of course we can. Now let's drill down, okay? A couple more minutes, hang with me. Let's drill down and talk about the real strategic, the underlying strategic threat here to all of this. I don't care if you're a member of the Norte Valle cartel or the Sinaloa cartel, or if you're Osama bin Laden. You send your toughest young sergeants and lieutenants to places like Guinea-Bissau to move your strategy, your ideas forward, okay? Your programs forward. That's what you do. And those tough young sergeants and lieutenants who are now rubbing shoulders together are building very close interpersonal relationships. And it's one thing to say something that we've known for a long time. Corporate Hezbollah's got the ability to pick up the phone and call corporate Hamas and ask for a favor. It's entirely something different when we think that in the not too distant future, or possibly now, that a key leader of a terrorist organization, a Middle Eastern terrorist organization, may have the ability to pick up the telephone and call a close friend who is a member of the Sinaloa cartel and ask for help. And if you think it's not going to happen, understand that those tough young Turks, those sergeants and lieutenants, will naturally ascend upward through the ranks of their organizations in the years to come, because they're trusted now. We need to be doing everything that we possibly can to break up these groups coming together in ungoverned space like Guinea-Bissau, other places in West and North Africa, and right to the south of our homeland in the tri-border area of Latin America. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.